Okay, hello and welcome to another one of these fantastic Nobody Studios investor events. My name is Barry O'Reilly. I'm the Chief Incubation Officer at Nobody Studios. And over the course of this series, we've got to spend time with some fantastic individuals and investors in Nobody Studios from the very beginning. People who heard about our story, got excited about our vision, and were willing to come on board from the very beginning to help us bring this vision to life. So we've had a great chance to spend time with lots of people, hear their own personal stories about what got them into entrepreneurship, as well as what's kept them excited about Nobody Studios as they followed along the way. And today we have one of our very favorite guests and one of my favorite people who I love hanging out with and having chats with all the time, the fabulous Melissa Perri. So Melissa, how you doing?
Good. How's everybody doing?
We're doing good. We're doing good.
Good.
Look, it's fantastic to have you on the show. It's even better to have you as a nobody from the very earliest beginnings. You've a really fantastic sort of career yourself, very entrepreneurial minded, even from the very beginning, really. You know, people might know you as a best-selling author or starting or providing fantastic product coaching, mentoring, and advising for businesses. But you know, your own story as entrepreneurship started like right from sort of day one, doing some pretty cool stuff. So, can you share with people a little bit of your own story about even how you got into doing sort of product in a way through your first sort of early experiences?
Yeah. So I got started in product like quite a while ago before I really knew what it was. Um, I think one of my first like entrepreneurial innovation stories really started in at Cornell in school. So I was part of this project team that was working with Kodak back in the early 2000s, and we were trying to come up with a new product line for Kodak that would help them compete with a lot of the stuff that was happening. The first iPhone had just came out, and they found that people were not, using film. They were not going back towards uh, going to cameras or anything like that, and they were struggling. So they brought on a team of us to help give them, more of a, I guess, a millennial perspective of what we were all doing. And we used basically what we would now think of as lean startup techniques, but we didn't call it there at the time. We called it market-driven innovation, and we wrote a whole paper on it that was published through Cornell on it. But there was a team of me, and I think we had like about 8 other people. Went out, did a bunch of research, brought it back to Kodak, kind of, synthesized it, and said we believe that you should be probably, if you're not going to build your own phone, which we said maybe you don't want to build your own phone, you should be really thinking about like doing stuff with images. People are taking photos on their phones now. We're like stopping using our digital cameras out at all the parties we were going to. You should put filters on them. You should think about like doing that one-touch Kodak stuff so that you can actually make it look better. And people really care about the images that they present onto Facebook and stuff. So we're giving them a lot of. It's really funny to go back and read it. And if you
Yeah, I
do
love
read
when
our
you tell the
paper,
story. Yeah, it's so
yeah,
funny. Yeah, it's
it's so
great.
funny because like all the stuff we suggested exists now, but Kodak wasn't the one to make it, and we had suggested it right at the time, like that the first version of the iPhone was out, all these different things, and a lot of that just got usurped into the iPhone and other stuff. So it was really interesting. So that was like my first foray into like innovation and that type of work. And I had been working at when I graduated school, it was like financial crisis. So of course I go to a bank, which dumb, but we
Oh,
were
yeah.
working, but we were working in more of the. I was working more in the IT section. And at first, though, I went to Capital IQ, and they taught me how to be a product manager, although we called it business analysts. And I was supposed to UX designer and a product manager. And I had left there and gone to Barclays because nobody had heard of the term product manager before. And my friend was a software developer at Barclays, not Barclays, at a hedge fund, actually making a ton of money. And I was like, oh, that's what I have to do to make money. I have to go be a software developer. And about like 3 months into that role, I hated it so much that I started weaseling my way back into product management at the bank. I was at Barclays, and my boss was like, "No, you have to have 7 years of experience before you become a product manager." And I was like, "Nah, I'm just gonna just keep doing this until you tell me not to." Actually, he told me not to, and I just kept doing it. So I stayed
Right
there
on.
and left, and I joined Open Sky as employee number like 20. I was like 25 or something at this small startup in New York City. And there I was a full blooded product manager when nobody was trying to make me code, which was great. And I stayed with Open Sky. We grew it through about 200, 250 people. Like when I left, um, went to another company called Conductor as a product manager, product designer. And eventually I was just like, I was learning, it was through Open Sky, I started getting into really these lean startup techniques. And I'd done a weekend boot camp called Lean Startup Machine that was run by Trevor Owens. And it was all about how to start companies rapidly and how to validate them in the market. And I said, oh, I can use this in my job as a product manager. So I
Yeah.
said, great, let me like bring it back. And I started experimenting at Open Sky, and my boss really encouraged me with it. He said, you should start teaching classes on that, which is how I got into teaching that I do now. But he's like, a lot of people aren't doing this experimental mindset when it comes to product management. You should help. And eventually, after Conductor, I said, hey, I think I really want to go start my own thing in my naivety, but my full ambition. And the guys at Lean Startup Machine were partnering with a startup accelerator in Italy called Tech Peaks, and they were bringing 65 people from all over the world together, throwing them together and saying, use rapid validation to create startups over in the Italian Alps. So I joined, I got in.
How can you say no to that, right? That's amazing.
Exactly. It was awesome, and, probably one of the craziest leaps I've ever made. But not a ton of companies came from it, which is totally fine, but I learned so much about starting a company. I learned a lot about what are the right conditions to start companies. I learned a lot about accelerators and incubators and all those things, and I traveled around Europe at the time too, helping other people with product management and going to other accelerators and incubators that were started by governments and teaching them UX design and product management. So I got to see a lot through there. I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to, go into a safe space where I could fail because, the company we were recruiting did not work out, but that's totally fine. But I learned so much about entrepreneurship through that program, and I met so many amazing people that I still talk to today. It was such a great experience, and we're all getting together actually for a 10-year reunion in August in Italy, which is exciting. But I came
Yeah,
back
that
and
sounds amazing when you get a chance to like stay
yeah,
connected with these people though, right? For over a
yeah, I
decade
still work.
is very special, right? I think says a lot about the community that was created around that time and
Oh
but
yeah.
also just the experience of going through these like building a company is one of these very unique, challenging experiences where you really can connect with people going through
Yeah.
adversity to create things.
Yeah, and I think that's what made us all so close too. So everybody lives all over the world, and when I was traveling, speaking at conferences, when I got back, um, everywhere I landed, there would be a tech peaker there to hang out with, and we all stayed really close, even if we didn't see each other for a very long time. It's like you kind of pick up where you left off. So it was such a really special thing, like having other people going through the same thing as you and learning through it, that I really enjoyed it. And when I came back to the United States, I ended up starting my own company, first consulting and doing freelancing, and then built that into an online school called Product Institute today.
Yeah, no, it's been amazing, like to see you do such amazing work over time. But the thing I really love hearing as well, though, is you talking about these experiences of, especially being in Tech Peaks, right? There's a similarities there with Nobody Studios about creating a community, a group of people trying to build companies together collaboratively. It's not a competitive portfolio where you're trying to one team outdo the other. It's like people really trying to help each other and grow,
Mhm.
and the connections that you make there are really special, right? And I think that's one of the things that's really unique as well about Nobody is it is a cooperative portfolio, right? Teams work together to create more together. Thought Forma is use Ovations is built on top of that platform. So all these companies are working together to achieve more and building these relationships. So for someone like yourself, you've done so much already. When you heard about Nobody, how did you find out about Nobody Studios, first of all, in the first beginning?
Well, I learned it from you, Barry.
Oh, well, no way, really? That's amazing. How did you do that? Sorry.
Yeah. So I've known Barry for a long time, and he did tell me about it, and I got very excited because I have done a lot of work with really large companies who have been trying to start accelerators and incubators. I was a mentor for a couple of them um, well after Tech Peaks, where there was, large corporations. I've seen large corporations do it in different ways, but like I had worked for one big telecom company out of the UK, and they created a accelerator for a bunch of small teams. So I was like a mentor there for them. I saw a bunch of Techstar stuff in New York City while I was there. I've seen so many different versions of doing incubators and accelerators around there. And I feel like I've learned a lot about what works and what's not going to work. And I really like the premise of Nobody Studios because one, I like meet a lot of people who have great ideas and don't know how to do like hire a team, don't know how to get this off the ground, don't know what to do. And I love the premise of Nobody just like helping to build that team around them and take somebody who, you don't have to be a coding, crazy Mark Zuckerberg to start a company. You can start it with a great idea and a big passion for it. You don't need to know all the technical stuff if you have the right team around you. And I think that's really important. So I love that Nobody gave the opportunity for people to do that. I also love that
Really,
it's investing. Go ahead.
no, just that point I think is really important. It's one of the things that we see a lot is that there's almost this expectation if you suddenly have an idea and you want to start a company, and maybe you're a Mark Zuckerberg with engineering forte, or maybe you're someone who has no technical experience but you've a really good sense of a domain. Often suddenly as people start these businesses, there's sort of this unspoken expectation that they're suddenly going to be brilliant at everything about building a business, and it's actually unfair on individuals. Some people mightn't even want to do that. I think one of the interesting things we keep seeing in the studio is you can be really passionate about a domain. You could be a great technologist, a great designer, but the business can be brought to life by putting all the support around you. And you don't have to be the CEO of everything. Like we've some people who are just fantastic, really great understanding of a domain, but they like to be in the marketing role of a team, or they actually just prefer to be a designer. But they're still someone who's brought this idea to the company and starting to grow it. So I think it's a really important point to just emphasize for folks.
Yeah. And it's hard because like I meet a lot of people, like I've been in Ubers before where somebody's like, I have a great startup idea. Like I hear you teach at Harvard. Can I tell you my startup idea? And they are great. But they're like, I drive for Uber. Like, how am I ever going to start this? Like, how am I going to code? How am I going to do that? And it shouldn't be a barrier to entry for those things. And that's why I got really passionate about like lean techniques for validating stuff. So, I know nobody is you grew up Barry with like the lean techniques and then the lean enterprise and all those things that you did. So I knew also with Nobody Studios, like they're going to be validating things correctly and understanding what it takes to actually validate something and push somebody through and encourage somebody to go out there and do things, the slow manual way first and then work yourself up to getting into the really complicated technology pieces of it. But after you make sure that there's actually a business and you can validate it. And I think that's really important for people to understand. There's just a lot of people out there like, who you just don't need to be a crazy tech genius to be able to start your own company. And I really like that premise.
Yeah, no, it's fabulous and brings more people into the system, which is always good. So for someone like yourself then, who's you're one of the earliest investors, you probably, when we started this a little over 2 years ago, you were one of the first people I spoke to, primarily because I knew you'd be able to bring all these product management insight and to what we're trying to do as well. So what are some of the things you've observed over the twists and turns of just seeing Nobody sort of make its progress over the last couple of years?
Yeah, I think I've been watching the different companies, get onboarded, get started up there, which is really great. I think Ovation's being, one of the first ones that you guys have in market and actually getting up there. I know what I appreciate too is it's not trying to be flashy. Like there was a thing at Tech Peaks where they expected us to be able to validate, launch, and make a super successful business in less than 6 months. And that's just not realistic. So I like that it hasn't been crazy, unreasonable expectations. Like you really take people along for the ride. You really validate things over time. You build the teams, around them. You get them the help they need to make sure that they could be successful. But it's not something that happens overnight. And I think any investor out there needs to understand that you don't get rich quick off these things, and it's going to take a while to build stuff up. And especially in the early days, I work with like a lot of founders, and I work with a lot of startups. And I think people have this weird expectation that everything happens very quickly. And it doesn't. It takes time and it takes energy and it takes like good investment to really make sure that you have a foothold. And especially getting that first, 100 customers, first 10 customers, first 50 customers, that's a lot of work. And then eventually you'll hit a stage where you start growing like crazy and you can double and triple and quadruple like year over year. And that's great. those years go by really fast, but it's the hard slog at the beginning. And I think nobody like really appreciates that. And they're not trying to, treat their founders like workhorses that, should be able to give you a return in an unreasonable amount of time. It's like really there on the founder side to take you through this, vet the companies, make sure you have a really good business, and show people how to actually do the work, which is great.
Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. Actually, it's funny, when you're in the day to day of building these things, it always feels like you're going slow, or it's never fast enough, or you're never making the progress you want. But there are those moments where you can sort of step back and zoom out, if you will, and sort of see, like we're creating systems here to help the business scale over time. And our goal was to do 3 years in the first, or 3 companies in the first year, and 5 companies in the year after that, and just sort of grow 50% year over year. And that's sort of again, it takes time. Businesses take
Mhm.
time, and I think it's great to hear someone like yourself sort of just remind us of that, because yeah, we're all in here beating ourselves up going, we could go faster, but it does, it's a really important lesson. So
Yeah, and like
yeah,
I
sorry.
run into, I'll say too, like I work with a lot of growth stage VCs, and the companies that you're working with, by the time they hit 20 million in ARR, some of them they've been around 10 years, some of them 15 years, some of them 20 years, and they just hit their growth spurt. So like it's all on a journey, and it'll all get there. But I think it's just I think some people just don't have reasonable expectations about how long this is and how much work it actually is to get something off the ground and get it started.
Yeah, no, right on. So looking forward then, what are you sort of most excited about when you sort of think about the future for what Nobody Studios could be, and just entrepreneurship in general?
Yeah, I'm excited to see more companies grow. I love the premise of, I like the premise of just taking founders and helping them steer them in the right way. So I'm excited about that. What I also like is that there's no prescribed, this company versus that type of company that nobody is in. You get to see a whole gamut of things, and I get involved in startups and like board roles and stuff like that to see the different types of companies. Like that's what makes me excited. So I say that I never a founder on my own because I don't have any great ideas. So I love observing everybody else's good ideas, and
You're
that's
good
what
at
makes
making
me
them
excited
great.
about it.
That's a
Yeah,
skill in itself,
I take things and I scale them, and that's like my thing. But I'm not going to be the person who comes up with this crazy idea. Like, and I know that, and I think that's cool. So I like Nobody because I get to watch all these crazy ideas come happen, and then get to help them, which is really fun for me, and that's what makes me tick. So I'm excited to watch it grow over time. I'm excited to see more founders and help, bring a space where maybe it's not just the typical tech bro type founders that you would find in Silicon Valley. It's got a really good group of people from all over. So I'm excited to watch that. And I'm excited to see some more, next gen founders who are going to change the world.
Love it. Yeah. And like it's fun to sort of see that, as you say, we've have investors in 30 countries, we've got teams in 17. It's really fascinating to see what global reach we have already, of people who maybe have never had that classic opportunity to be in the Silicon Valley or in Boston or in these areas where typically most people feel like startups have to happen. So
And
and
it's,
even yeah.
yeah. And I'd say too, like, you know what, with the world changing and with everybody being remote, not everything has to happen in Boston, Silicon Valley, New York City anymore. Like I moved out of New York City during COVID. But I work online just the same way that I did before. And I think post COVID really opened up a nice opportunity for people to really be location agnostic. And so many companies are, really, uh, I mean, so many businesses are popping up everywhere. So if you are, and especially as an investor, like if you are only looking at those hubs, you're missing out on like some other really great opportunities in different areas. And it's location agnostic now. So I really love that it's so spread out for nobody, and that it's not really just looking at the hubs.
Great, right. And we've even got people like Rob who's interested in not only what we're trying to do, but partnering with companies in the studio. So thanks, Rob, for sharing your comment. Melissa, look, it's always great to have you on the show. Thank you for being a nobody. Thank you for being with us from the very beginning. Like you say, we're 2 years at it, but we're only getting started. So many more fun times ahead. And glad to have you on the journey with us. So thanks very much for sharing your insight with us today.
Thanks. It's great to be here.